I couldn't be where I was today without her. You know, that's what Bishop Anthony Pinkney wrote about his wife Keisha on social media. Sounds pretty great, right? It's exactly what you'd expect from a respected pastor in York, Pennsylvania. But behind that public praise, well, a completely different and incredibly violent story was about to come out. So that's what this video is all about. We're going to dive into the story of Bishop Anthony Pinkney. It's a really tough case where a figure that everyone looked up to is now facing accusations of just shocking violence. And as you can imagine, it's torn his community apart and brought up some really difficult questions about leadership and trust. Okay, so to really get why this story hit so hard, you have to understand who this man was in his community. We're talking about Bishop Anthony Pinkney of Bethel Commandment Church in York, Pennsylvania. He wasn't just a pastor, you know. He was seen as a real pillar of the community, a leader whose influence went way beyond the church walls. And listen, this wasn't some new guy on the scene. Bishop Pinkney had been doing this for over 20 years. He married his high school sweetheart, Keisha, way back in 2001. A year later, he started serving at Bethel Commandment Church. So we're talking about deep roots here, a picture of total stability and established leadership. And that picture was about to be completely shattered. That carefully built public image came crashing down. On July 3rd of this year, something happened. What started as what he called a private argument ended with the police investigation and the bishop himself in handcuffs. And the charges here are incredibly serious. We're not talking about a minor disagreement. According to the official records, Anthony Pinkney is facing 2 felony counts, one for aggravated assault, the other for strangulation. On top of that, there's a simple assault charge, and all of it stems from that incident on July 3rd with his wife, Keisha. So how did we get here? To understand that, we have to look at the details. And what I'm about to share comes directly from the official criminal complaint from the account Keisha Pinkney gave to the police while she was in a hospital bed. According to the complaint, things escalated fast. It all started with an argument. Keisha said she confronted her husband about an alleged affair and she asked him to leave the house. But that's when it turned violent. He allegedly grabbed her, yanked her to the floor, and then started punching her and throwing her around the room. It ended, she told the police, with him pinning her down on their bed and strangling her for what she says felt like 2 to 3 whole minutes. And in her statement, Keisha remembered him making a direct, terrifying threat. She says that in the middle of all this, her husband asked, "Where's the gun? I'm going to end it. I'm going to blow your brain away." She told investigators that in that moment, she genuinely believed he was going to kill her. The physical damage detailed in the complaint was just awful. Keisha reported having a really sore throat that made it painful to even swallow, bruises on her arms and face, but there was something else, something permanent. She told police she heard a loud pop in her left ear during the attack, and according to the report, she was left with complete and total hearing loss in that ear. So after all of this, in the immediate aftermath, you get 2 very different stories emerging, and that conflict really sets the stage for everything that follows legally. And this is really the heart of the case right here. When the police questioned Bishop Pinkney outside the hospital, he apparently described the whole thing as a tussle, just a tussle. He said his wife may have hit her head. Now compare that to what Keisha told law enforcement: being strangled, punched, having her head slammed on the floor, being threatened with a gun. It's just night and day. So right after that interview, police arrested Anthony Pinkney. He was released later that same day, but only after posting bail, and it was a pretty significant amount, $50,000. The legal action didn't stop with the bail though. Keisha Pinkney went and successfully filed for an emergency protection order against her husband. That order means he can't have any contact with her, and it went into effect on July 18th. It's set to last for 1 full year. And throughout all of this, what about the church? The very institution at the center of Pinkney's public life. Well, they've been completely silent. When news outlets reached out for a comment, Bethel Commandment Church had nothing to say. That leaves his congregation and the public just wondering, what is his status as their leader now? Yeah, that official silence has really just fueled a huge public debate. It's basically split people down the middle. Is this a private family matter, or is this a public issue that demands real accountability? Bishop Pinkney himself has only made one public statement. In it, he called the deeply personal matter. He didn't mention his wife, didn't mention the allegations. He just asked for patience, grace, and privacy. Well, that request for privacy did not go over well with everyone. It was met with some really sharp criticism. One response that was quoted in the news called his statement deflection and even spiritual gaslighting. The argument being you can't cause that kind of harm and then just hide behind a plea for privacy. Others have zeroed in on the professional side of things, his role as a leader. As one news source put it, the kind of allegations we're talking about here, both the affair and the extreme physical violence, should be totally disqualifying for anyone in ministry, period. So a case like this with a leader who is so respected and accusations that are so shocking, it really forces all of us to think about a fundamental conflict, one that we see time and time again with public figures. And it leaves us with this final question, one that goes way beyond this one story in Pennsylvania. When any public figure, someone we admire, a leader in our community, faces these kinds of devastating accusations that come from behind closed doors, where do we draw the line? Where does their right to privacy end and our right, the public's right, to demand accountability begin? And that is a question with no easy answer. This situation is worse when it's someone who stands on a pedestal teaching others about faithfulness, commitment, and the power of God's love. If there's one thing we know for sure, it's that these kinds of allegations don't just damage the individual, they chip away at the trust people place in the very institution of the church. It's a bad account for any pastor to fall into. It goes beyond a failure of marital trust. It's an example of hypocrisy. When leaders behave in ways that go against the very principles they should embody, they not only bring shame upon themselves, but also lead others astray. God cannot be mocked. You cannot lead others with wisdom and truth if you're actively living in a contradiction to the very teachings you espouse. You sow seeds of destruction, both in your personal life and in the lives of others, and the consequences are inevitable. The true message here is that Christian leaders, especially those in positions of influence, should be the living embodiment of the values they preach. If they falter, as many will, it should be handled with humility and repentance, not arrogance and defiance. At the end of the day, no one is above reproach. When a leader's actions don't align with their words, it's not just a personal failure, it's a failure to represent Christ. The truth is, those who live this double life will inevitably reap what they sow. In cases like this, we're reminded that while leaders are human and prone to mistakes, the weight of their influence means their actions carry consequences that extend far beyond themselves. And for those of us watching, we must ask ourselves, where do we draw the line between holding leaders accountable and giving them grace? The answer is clear. God's grace is always available, but accountability is not optional.